Hi everyone, so I'm just preparing to make my compost tea. For this compost tea, I'm not going to be adding any food to the tea. I'm just going to be using my compost and that's it. And I'm just going to let the brewer run for about 24, maybe 36 hours and check the microbes or the microbial community at the end of the brew. I've already tested the compost beforehand and I can share with you what the data looks like. And at the end of the brew, I'm going to test the solution, the tea, just to see how the microbial community had changed. Ideally, I should see more protozoas, amoebas, and flagellates, hopefully. Maybe more fungal hyphae. We'll see how it goes. Or fungal biomass. With teas and extracts, again, your basic ingredient is your compost. High quality, biologically rich and diverse compost pile. For my composts, I tend to use about 10 to 15 different ingredients every time I build a pile. And the reason I do that is because I'm encouraging biological diversity in my pile. I want to be able to see different types of organisms in my pile. And that just encourages more diversity in the soil when I apply my teas or extracts in the ground. Other things you'll need for making your brews, you'll need a sturdy 400 micron mesh bag. Now it's a 400 micron mesh bag because it's big enough to allow your larger nematodes through if you have them in your compost, as well as mats of fungal hyphae to go through the holes. And also it helps for discouraging larger particles in your compost to leave the bag. They stay in the bag, which then makes sure that you're not clogging your sprayer later on, or you're clogging your brewer while you're brewing. This bag has about 3 liters of compost. I tend to fill it up about 2/3 of the way and leave 1/3 of a gap to make sure that I'm letting oxygen to go through the compost material in the bag once I put it in the brew. I don't want things to be compacted. If you have too much compost in here, things tend to get compacted, which then it doesn't allow air to go through the compost. Now with this pump and with this particular type of setup, there's a volcano effect that happens in the water, right? So if you have the bag sitting, it's going to be moving around, but when it's sitting in the middle of or in the brew, the volcano, the movement of the water essentially goes this way. It's going to hit the bag, and the agitation from the water is enough to extract the organisms out of the compost material. So you want the organisms to go in the water from the compost, and then it goes this way, and then it basically the movement looks something like this, right? So I'll show you what the top of the brew looks like now, since I've already turned on the pump. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of agitation there. That's what we're looking for. Some people use what are those things called? Little air pumps that you use for an aquarium. Those, or air stones, those aren't sufficient enough to provide oxygen in the brew, and you can get anaerobic conditions when you have a setup like that. So I prefer pumps that are much more powerful than that. So I'm just gonna go ahead. Oh, another thing as well that I want to share with you, this compost that I'm using contains, even though it's cold right now, it has quite a bit of arthropods hanging around. I've got worms in here. I've got diversity of springtails in here. I see them jumping around in my compost, and it's actually good to see them there. So that tells me that they're thriving in my pile. They're one of the decomposer organisms, right? They're the detritivores, so they're doing their job in grinding, cutting up, and crushing the compost material to allow for bacteria and fungi to colonize those surfaces and decompose it even more. So I've just put the bag of compost into my brewer. That's my first 3 liters into 15 gallons of water. Now, one thing I also recommend is if you're going to be making an extract or a tea, I wouldn't just leave it to the water, the agitation in the water to extract the organisms. I would actually also include manual agitation. So what that means is taking the compost material in the bag and massaging it at the same time. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you take the bag, and what I'm doing is I'm squeezing the compost material, massaging it as best as I can. And this action encourages more extraction to happen. So I'm just making sure that I'm doing more extraction of organisms on top of what the water is doing for me. And hopefully I'll get more microbes in my tea or extract. Alright, so I'm just gonna go ahead and replace the compost. After I feel like, alright, I think I've extracted enough from that compost material, I'm gonna take out what's in the bag right now and add new compost. The leftover compost you can put back in your pile, or you can spread it on the soil. You can do whatever you like with it, and yeah, and then add a new batch of compost in the bag and do the same thing over again. All right, I hope that made sense. Thanks.